All right, awesome. Super pumped to hear these guys talk. They've got a lot to share, so we'll just kind of dive into it. I want to have each of them introduce themselves a little bit and tell us a little bit more about how they even got into the area of designing for physical spaces. So Maja, you're at Square. It sounds like you guys just finished getting a Australia office set up. So kind of curious to know how that went for you.
So I've been at Square for 6 years, and I'm in charge of real estate and office design and construction. So I get to build all the amazing spaces that our employees get to work in. And Square's trying to take over the world, and we're doing okay so far. But we just opened an office in Australia, and so that was a really interesting design challenge that we'll talk about more during the panel.
Cool. Alan, you're at IDEO, so tell us about that.
I've been at IDEO 10 years. A little bit about my unconventional career path. I studied psychology, business, and art when I was at Santa Barbara. And from there, I just followed my passions, like we were talking about before in the conference. And so I worked as a peer career counselor in college. Then I moved to Guam and was a sports and entertainment director. You didn't see that coming. And then after that, I was a floor manager for a catering company. Then I moved into event design and was an interior stylist for 7 years. But then I followed a passion to graphics, and I worked for a graphic design agency, and I worked on everything tangible for them. I was a project and resource manager. And then during the dot bomb, I moved over to event design. I donated half of my time, and I ended up at SF MoMA and putting on their large-scale events and really creating interactive, immersive experiences. Then I found my way to IDEO, where all my career path kind of made sense, and I became an experience lead there, and really diving into people's needs, their passion, physical environment, career path, all of that. And now I'm lucky enough to do that for our clients, so I work on the outside designing spaces.
Cool. Kurt, you're at Steelcase, so tell us about that.
So I describe myself as a recovering architect, and by architect I don't mean system architect, I mean the kind that carries around yellow rolls of trace paper. And I say recovering because you know once you have a design education, it sort of teaches you a certain way to think that extends beyond even if you're practicing architecture. So I work for one of the largest furniture manufacturers in the world as part of the new business innovation team. So it's one of the groups responsible at Steelcase for developing new concepts and testing them in market. And we're really focused on non-traditional, from our standpoint. We're not designing chairs and tables and objects. We're thinking about new business models. So it's a little bit of design, a little bit of design strategy, always thinking about space, always thinking about user needs, and human-centered design approach to the workplace.
Cool. So I know a lot of the people in the audience are working with pixels, moving them around, very much the traditional sort of UI design paradigms. And we have our own processes. Wondering if you guys can speak to what is the process for designing a physical space?
Do you want to start?
Well, I think about really listening to people. My ears are my biggest tool, and getting their feedback. And how do you get their feedback in really creative ways so it's just not all negative? You know, you don't hear about what you're doing wrong, and this is a horrible space, and how do you get them involved in the creation of the new space? So we get their feedback, and then we take ideas from the outside world. We go into spaces and think, what are the one thing I can take from this environment and bring back to make our space a little bit more magical? And then I take those ideas, and then we prototype, start small. We prototype project rooms with foam core. We can move out the walls and move them in and change the space around. So you think about all of that, prototype before you go large. And then before you go large, you have to look at other things. Like people are the biggest variable in the space. So what nonverbals in the space are you communicating out? And that has to do with color, and that has to do with sound, taste. All of those things really make an environment. So that's the environment that we go through, and we're not doing it alone. We're doing it with lots of feedback along the way.
Yeah, I find that if you ask 100 people what their ideal work environment is, you'll get 150 different answers back, because people like working in different environments depending on what their work is, because different environments will influence the work that you do. You'll be inspired in different ways depending on what type of space that you're in. So when you're trying to design one space for 1,000 different people or even just 20 different people, you have to kind of find that happy medium that provides all those different opportunities depending on how you like your work environment to be. So we are in the business of trying to design flexible and creative work environments while still in four walls. So a lot of feedback is really critical to designing to our clients.
And Kurt, what about you guys in the more consulting model?
Yeah, so I mean, I love just the fact that these guys are both saying, you know, it's all around user needs. And traditionally in the field of architecture, that's not the norm. You think about, you know, this very ancient form of interaction design in 3 dimensions, and it used to be that, you know, a school or a hospital or a church had a certain typology, and you didn't really need to rethink the types of social interactions and behaviors that you needed to design for. Well, that changes, especially when you get into the workplace, and the purpose of an organization is different for every single organization, and so you really do need a more user-centered approach, and we're very rigorous at Steelcase around doing great design research to inform, you know, our design, and that's not something that even still that's the norm in the industry in terms of just outside of workplace design, regular buildings. There's still, people don't do as rigorous sort of programming approach as you might think, and part of that is we've learned from, you know, adjacent fields and, you know, UX and interaction design, and the kind of quick iterative loops that we're all talking about, you know, was really pioneered by software design. So I think we have, you know, folks like you guys to thank for the transition that we're, you know, experiencing in our industry.
So you guys have 150 different requests coming in for this is what the space should look like. How do you synthesize that down into what you actually will produce?
We always look for common themes because there's always themes. A lot of people have the same kind of basic needs, like they need to feel comfortable, they need to feel supported, they need to have the tools that they need to do their job. There's a number of different basic requirements that kind of build the initial set of design constraints. And then you also look at what your resources are, you know, what your building is, because those are really physical design constraints. And then from there you layer on feedback about your team's culture, what type of projects they're working on, what type of work they're doing. And it's up to us to kind of take all that feedback in, synthesize it, and then turn it into a physical representation of what people need. So it's starting really small, just with the initial constraints and feedback, and then trying to come up with a design. And you always get like maybe 70-80% of it right if you're lucky, and then you just iterate from there and rip things out and build new things and change as your workforce changes and as your needs change as well.
Let's touch on that, because for us, we have the luxury of, you know, if something is wrong, push a button, re-release to the App Store, or push a new build to the website, which is a great luxury to have. But I'm imagining for you it's a little bit harder to correct for, not mistakes per se, but for the lack of a better word, how do you correct for mistakes?
Yeah, well, through prototyping, you can minimize the mistakes. So one little secret sauce that we have is I like, I wish. And so when you're designing a new space, and we redesigned a bathroom, and we put up a sign that says, I like, I wish. And it makes the feedback positive instead of negative and annoying and hard. And so when you say, I like that we have a shower, I wish that water came out of it. And so when you have those things, you can have all the I wishes, and then people start to put +1s by an idea that they like. And for someone like us, we can take those ideas and we know that we're pleasing the whole community and going in the right direction. So if one person says, I need purple toilet paper, you'd be like, well, you were kind of an outlier. It doesn't, you know, but look at all the people we're pleasing, and we're working toward one great solution. But, you know, really not getting too deep into something and making a global decision right away is like starting small. Really helps, you know, making radical errors.
I have 2 thoughts to share on this. One, just thinking about like IDEO's space in particular, is there are certain messages I think that you intend to send to your employees that give permission to change their own environment. So providing that kind of choice and control from the user. And you know, you can walk into a space and everything looks sort of polished and perfect. And I know Square thinks a lot about this too. if everything's rendered at that really high fidelity and it looks like, it's going to look weird if I move this chair 4 inches that way, versus, there's certain textures and even intentional inconsistencies that can invite people to like move things around, and this couch is on wheels, let's roll it, switch it around. So I think that's one way to learn, is to see what people actually do, and also to grant permission to do that. The other thing I would say from my consulting experience with big companies, and I don't know if a lot of you probably work with large companies as clients occasionally, is we would get into this interesting translation game where we were hearing from like executives. We were just talking about this before. Here's our business objectives, here's what we need, blah, 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 blah. And then you talk to employees and they're saying, well, this is how I like to work and this is what I need. And you end up kind of being the middleman and a mediator and negotiator. And that can mean saying to the executives, like, actually your people work like this and this is going to work better for them. And occasionally it can be the other way around, where you're like, actually your cubicle is not something you own personally, and all the like sports memorabilia that's like shrouding your 10 by 10 foot cube doesn't make it yours. You're actually here to do a job, and we think that we can organize the space to help you do that better. So I'm sorry, but we're going to have to like take all your swag out of your cube. So it goes both ways.
Executives it's a fun dance to do design with executives, because just like you were saying, like your CEO and your CFO, if you work at a company that has C-level executives, they don't use the space the way that you do. Like they don't do the same type of work that we do. And so if you ask them to design an office, you would get the craziest office in the world that would probably not support the type of work that you need. So with our executives, I get feedback from them, but they're not the ones who are making the design decisions.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys have a lot of experience working with companies that run the gamut of different kind of cultural entities. So the ones that are maybe just heads down, like we gotta crush it and release them next month, otherwise we're screwed, versus the ones that are maybe more established, and certainly you guys now, Maja, opening extra offices. How do you guys manage these different cultures and understand what they're really going for?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. At first, when we started recruiting a lot, and we were getting in a lot of employees from companies, bigger companies, like, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but like companies, let's say like Facebook and Google, companies that just like really take care of their employees and provide them with like every whim and fancy that they want. I would have people coming up to me and saying like, well, at Google, I had a nap pod, and so I need that in order to do my work. And that's fine to give your office team that feedback, but the way in which they would deliver it sounded so demanding and entitled that it really turned me off from wanting to collaborate with that employee. On the other side, having people coming from a lot of different backgrounds and kind of getting this melting pot of different cultures in your company is incredibly valuable, because there's no one right culture, and so having people that not like a hive mind, but more of like a melting pot is really valuable. But I'll let you keep going on this.
How can I build on this? So since I go out to different companies now, I really listen to them about what their culture is like, not to paint our culture over them, but to create something new. So a big aha moment for me was I had to create a culture that one of their core values was to be aggressive and driven and not nurturers. And I'm like, yeah. And then another one, they design in this arena of an overlap of fear and safety. They design spectacle. And I'm like, how do you design in that space? And like, wow. So really thinking about what they need and just creating a new environment for each one. And you have to make them innovative as well. So really thinking about what their values are and starting there and building out from that really depends on what the environment's going to be, what the culture's going to be. If you have a culture of permission, like you were talking about, to course correct that is really difficult. Best thing is attrition, because those people eventually leave. And onboarding, like onboarding everyone and be like, hey, this is what we do. We don't have offices, it's on your back. And bring your backpack and start working, and let's go. And an office is weight. We can move around. Let's be more nimble. So I think I got off track a little bit, but we can.
Cool. Kurt, anything to add to that, or?
I've forgotten what the original question is, but I did have, like, you made me think of, I think you were talking about how you, there's both cultural fit, so making sure the environment supports the culture that you want to build, and then there's also instances where you're trying to shift the culture, right? And I think that the way we think about it is, if you have your strategy and your culture, your environment should support those two, and there should be a fit between those three elements. And in some cases, there's a mismatch. Often if your strategy changes but your culture lags, or your culture's changed, new generation in the office, but your environment isn't supporting the new culture, that's where there can be mismatches, and that's fun, because that's the opportunity to do the kind of work that we do.
Cool. Yesterday, one of the presentations talked a little bit about Steve Jobs designing the space for Pixar and really trying to focus on that being a collaborative space where everyone had to interact with one another. Wondering if you guys are seeing trends right now, maybe along those lines, or different trends, and what those look like, and whether or not you agree or disagree with them.
I'm like the biggest Pixar fangirl, so anytime I can go to their campus, I do. And our office is heavily inspired by the atrium and the main campus at Pixar. Their concept that Ashley summarized so beautifully yesterday, in the back, talking about the main atrium as a space where you get these really amazing interactions between people that don't work together. So somebody's walking by from the finance team and somebody's walking by from an animating team, and they both get in the same coffee line and they have a cool conversation. We love that concept. And so at our headquarters, which is just a couple blocks away from here, we have our main drag down the center of our office. It's called the Boulevard, and it's a very bright public walking space that's punctuated by brighter light and a brighter carpet to designate wayfinding via texture and color instead of just signs. And it pushes all of the traffic down the center of the office. And then there's also little breakout spaces along the way. So if you run into someone, you want to have a conversation, you don't want to stand in the middle of the sidewalk, because that's super annoying. But there's a couch or there's a table that's right along the side, so then you can break away and have a little conversation. So in trends, as we're all seeing and reading about, open office is a big trend right now, breaking away from getting walls away from your office and just providing more flexible spaces. But just as all trends are, it's very debated about if open offices are bad, if everybody should go back into offices. And I like to try to steer away from if something is good or bad. Every company just works differently, and different solutions work for different companies. So we're playing around with an open office with flexible spaces, and that's working for us right now, but it might not work for another company, and that's okay.
I support everything she says. And years ago, we coined a term called casual collisions. And so how do you promote these casual collisions throughout the day? Pixar does it really well. Square does it really well. So a lot of people wait for an offsite to all come together to get out of those work silos. But how can you have ritual within your company that brings you back to certain areas? So we have tea time once a week. And we don't do work during tea time. It's just to come and socialize. We have soup day on Friday, where our support staff, on Thursday, they're cutting up the soup and they have the recipe out, and then the next day they're making it and everyone's smelling the same common theme. And then we ring a bell like Pavlov, everyone comes running, and they're all random in the way that they're in line, and now they're socializing and bumping elbows with silos that wouldn't normally do. And then they come back and then they taste this wellness that's been created, and then 15 minutes they pause and then go back to work. So those are some rituals that we have, but our space, like Square, is also set up with ritual in mind. They have the Boulevard, they have this amazing place to get coffee. So we have these places designed where people pause throughout the day, and the introverts can kind of see them from afar. The introverts way in the back that just want to be protected, don't surprise me. But I still want to know what's going on. And like the big thing to know about introverts, they don't want to be separated. They want to know what's going on, feel connected to the community, but they can just see it and opt in when they want to. So it's great. They feel part of it, and you're not like exposing them and burning them out and all of that. So yeah, I'm a strong believer in these casual collisions.
Cool. Kurt, what about you, trends?
Yeah, so I mean, I can kind of talk to this theme that's coming up around, open office and casual collisions and serendipity and ritual. I think that those become increasingly important when cross-departmental collaboration is what drives innovation, and we're in an innovation economy right now. So those are more important than ever. I also want to echo what Maja said, which is, and there's a tendency, it's human nature to go, oh, that works, like let's put it over here, and then it doesn't work. And so you get people kind of jumping on the bandwagon saying, open office, open office, open office. And what we've seen is a backlash to that with some of our customers where that's been misapplied, or there's open, but there's nowhere to go when you need to focus and have downtime. So some of you may have read this book by Susan Cain called Quiet, which is about how to perform as an introvert. And we actually partnered with Susan Cain at our company to develop a set of kind of design principles and workspaces specific to nurturing the other half of your workday, because yes, you need to have all those casual collisions, but you also, I personally really value that reflective time and time to be heads down and alone. And if you're getting interrupted every 30 seconds by, a colleague or, a notification or, just lots of ambient noise, or if you have synesthesia and it's just, overwhelming, to be able to go into a place that is a more controlled environment or that's a quiet space is really important. So again, the theme would be choice and control and variety, a palette of environments, I think, that to give people the opportunity to find what they need, because nobody knows better your best place to work than the individual.
Absolutely. I have one comment. I love all that. So one thing is also to remain nimble and think about the space outside your office. You don't have to be there to do the best work. It's usually the easiest place to do work. But something came up at IDEO about 6 months ago where a programming team just couldn't get their work done. And they wanted to click off a lot more tasks. Mm-hmm. So we rented an Airbnb in Pacifica, and the team surfed. They went out 7 a.m., went out, shredded it, came back in, programmed all day, broke for lunch, an amazing lunch, then programmed again, went to an amazing dinner, came back and programmed. We were able to double our work for that 1 week, and the team was ecstatic. Everyone from the office wanted to go out and visit them, and we were like, But it was great. So how do you continue to act like a startup and keep on breaking the walls down?
Cool. So one of the things that in our field, at least, that can be very challenging, frustrating, maddening at times is kind of the pixel perfect perfection that you oftentimes have to really hone in on and make sure that last 10% is exactly right. It's the little big details, I guess. I'm wondering if you guys have lessons learned or stories about those little things that kind of help create activation in a space or really engender what you want to have happen in that space.
I'm sure Alan can speak for about 40 hours on this topic.
So the way I train new experience leads is I take them out to their favorite environments. So where do you want to go? And so I go out with them and we sit at the coffee bar in Potrero. I'm like, okay, you took me here. What's special about this space? And they start talking about it. I'm like, you're allowed to bring one idea back. Is it an object? Is it the music? Is it the sound? Is it the greeting? What is it that we can bring back? And so we look at all of those things and we bring back that one gem. And so we continue to do that in our space to create new environments. You have to lead me back to the question again. I always get
the little details that matter.
The little details. Yeah, so it might be the water delivery system, but oftentimes it's a nonverbal that the space is really telling you, and you just have to keep on diving, keep on going out, keep on discovering. Right now I'm all about inclusion and trying to find new ways to make everyone feel that they're represented in the community. So.
Oh, I know you were talking to us earlier about this idea of the orange in the fruit basket, and that might be a good example of those moments that kind of push people to do things.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what's the fruit left in the organic fruit bowl? It's the orange, and why is that? It's because of the barriers between you and getting to something good. So you would take that orange to your meeting and you would have sticky hands and it's a mess and the commitment of eating the whole thing, I can't possibly do that. And so you cut up this orange and then you get to good faster. And so when we think about our work environment, we think about what's the barrier between us and getting our work done, us and creative work. And so it's our jobs to keep removing those barriers. So the work that we're doing in our space is the best work we could do, and it's the space that's most conducive to that work. Doesn't mean that you have to be there all day. You can work where you need to be, but this is where your life is easiest.
Cool. Anything to add?
Yeah, with details, with our most recent Australia office, this was one of my most favorite projects that we worked on. With our San Francisco office, we got a lot of feedback after we first moved in that the space felt a little bit too sterile. And that's because when we're designing a space that we're going to be in for 10 years, I was really nervous about giving in to office trends at the time, like putting in ball pits and like slides and like green walls and all that kind of stuff. Because what if I spent a bunch of money on that and then it was totally passé 2 years later and then I had to spend money to rip it out? So we went with a really kind of clean, neutral palette that we felt we could just project our culture on for 10 years to come. But our employees were saying, it's a little too white. Can you like mix it up a little bit? So we took that feedback and applied it and tested it on our Australia office. And we went around the city. We were in Melbourne, and we went to a ton of different artists markets. And we got to talk to local artists. And we bought tons of like little paintings and tchotchkes and like little things, and we kind of tucked them all throughout the office. So in every corner there was a little kind of moment that reflected the local city and the culture that we were in. And if you've been to Melbourne, there's amazing street art everywhere. And so we connected with a street artist and we said, we have all these great walls, can you do a mural for us? And he did, and it's amazing. And the feedback coming out of that office is it feels like Square, but it feels like Square in Australia. And it's because of all of those little details, which is fantastic. So now I'm going back and trying to pull that same design process through the rest of our offices so they feel really reflective of the environments that they're in.
Nice.
And then on the flip side, with details, it can be tough for us because we're designing on these huge, like hundreds of thousands of square feet spaces, but we also have to look into every single detail. Like we also have to look at the pixels. So like right now, I'm working with this amazing fabric that is made up of 3 different colors, like a mid-tone and then a dark tone and then a light tone. And when you weave it together, you get this kind of cool texture, but through color. So I was looking at this and I thought, oh, well, what if I did a chair using this fabric? And then what if I pulled one of the colors from the 3 out and put it on a chair, on another chair? And my architects were like, whoa, 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 like you're getting way too far into the pixels, like you gotta pull it back. So that can be tough for us when we're working on this huge scale, but we still want to get in on all the little details because sometimes that's where the magic happens.
Very cool. So I know we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you guys, what can we do as people working with you to make your jobs and lives easier so we're not that person who's just complaining?
I think that the biggest thing that you can do is participate. So when you have an idea, come with an idea with different options and how to explore it, and don't put the ownership on us.
Yeah.
So it's really up to you and to gain consensus in your groups about what you want to do and why, and make sure that it's nimble, it's economical, it's viable, it follows the business need, and then come in and let's explore those new ideas. If we get bombarded with so many different ideas, there's no way that we could have the same passion as you to make it happen. So really working with everyone really invigorates us and it empowers you as individuals.
Yeah, I love that. It's all about phrasing. Instead of going up to whomever is in charge of your offices and making demands, making suggestions or asking to have a conversation is a lot nicer than someone saying like, I need a nap pod. Instead you can say like, what would it take for us to get these? Or do you think that would be right for our company? Just phrasing is really helpful. That'd be like if somebody came up to you and was like, I need these 6 features now. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, how does this fit into the app? Like, it's all about context.
So I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently, bend it to my own purposes, and do like a mini request and plug for something I'm working on. One of the sort of things that my team is entering into, and our whole company is thinking a lot about, is responsive environments, and it's kind of where interaction design, meets architecture. And so, we talk, I'm sure we all use the word Internet of Things, and sometimes I just sort of can't say that word with a straight face because I've read it so many gazillions of times. But it's an important thing that we're paying attention to. So we're looking at presence and presence detection and identity detection in environments and what becomes possible when you can have that kind of responsive, interactive environments. And so I just, if you guys are around at lunchtime and want to chat about that, I'm really curious to learn from designers in adjacent fields around how you might approach that. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. This has been really, really just great to hear your thoughts. So just want to say thanks again for coming up and speaking your minds. So
Thank
yeah.
you.
All right.
Thanks.